This is a summary of what was said in Chopper's political podcast by Christopher Hope, featuring GB News' national reporter Charlie Peters discussing the grooming gang scandal. Peters reveals shocking statistics about Pakistani men in grooming gangs, stating, "In some towns up to 1 in 50 people prosecuted were Pakistani heritage men. That is an insane overrepresentation." He also confirms these gangs are still actively targeting white girls in Britain today. For more uncensored reporting on this scandal, please like, subscribe, and comment below.
Or what?
Well, Baroness Casey calls them do-gooders.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to use that term.
No.
Very much do-badders as far as I'm concerned. I think prioritise...
They failed these victims.
They did worse than that. I mean, they failed the entire country that needed to be given justice on this.
Because of offending a racial group.
The main claim on this issue has always been that they prioritised, in a sense, community cohesion and a left liberal version of multiracialism, multiculturalism over justice for women and girls, boys and men also caught up in this crisis. I think there's a lot to say that is true, but I think it actually is worse than that. And I think what we're going to be revealed in future investigations, I hope, is that it's not just do-gooders covering up for political reasons. Actually, there's corruption and collusion going on here. There are people in positions of authority, be they police officers and council leaders, who this channel knows about, being involved in engaging with these gangs directly. I think there is going to be police action revealing that in the coming months and years. We're aware of some live investigations on that issue specifically. It's not just trying to prevent community tension. We know about people in authority literally working hand in hand with these rapists. And it's also about an issue of organised criminality.
Yep.
This isn't about local areas, a few towns and cities with force fields around them and local failures there. This is a national issue, Chris. So this is about trafficking links between loads of different towns and cities, about hundreds of links between perpetrators all over the country. So I'll ask you a question directly. They're not good people, those who covered them up.
They have failed here.
They have failed.
And they'll be held to account.
Yeah.
What do you make of Diane Abbott when she said there was misinformation on this, nonsense, deliberate misinformation about child sexual grooming? The issue of race seems to be there. She says that the convicted child sex offenders are mostly white.
Well, she was referring to data what the data said. And when we looked at it for our investigation 2 years ago for Grooming Gangs, Britain and Shane, that documentary, we found actually there was a significant overrepresentation of Pakistani men when you look at this across the country. We found in some towns that up to 1 in 50 people prosecuted for this crime in that area were Asian heritage, predominantly Pakistani heritage men over the age of 16. That is an insane overrepresentation. So to claim without the information that this was actually a white man majority problem, there just wasn't the evidence for that.
Because the data wasn't being collected.
It wasn't.
And it was used partially and then used to support those views. There's now a debunked theory, but some are still saying it.
I should say that the government has consistently said since January when this issue shot up that we don't need a national inquiry because the local inquiries have worked. On this issue of ethnicity in particular, the government has always referred to the Telford inquiry as being successful. It published in 2022. It found over 1,000 victims from several decades. In the progress report since then, published 2 years later, they found that they still were not collecting ethnicity in Telford. Even as recently as the day of the Baroness Casey report being published, Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, was saying Telford worked. We've got so much work from Telford. No, we've just learned that the ethnicity data still is a problem around the country. If it's not being collected in Telford, how on earth is that still something that we should look to? Rejected a request from Oldham Council for an independent inquiry with statutory powers. The signature was Jess Phillips. The Home Office ministers, Yvette Cooper and Jess Phillips, had said that that wasn't necessary. That's now what's being ordered. Now, we drew attention to that, and I think that's what kick-started this national conversation in January. Jess Phillips is now making amends for that and is putting forward that. But again, she's claimed that Telford was a great situation. They found over 1,000 victims. Just 11 people were prosecuted in Telford.
In Telford alone.
Yeah, 7 convictions. Is that really success? As recently as 2 weeks ago, Chris, we published a piece from a survivor in Telford who waived her right to anonymity, whose child is in Egypt because she's living in chaos in England because her perpetrators still haven't been arrested. Jess Phillips' record on this is pretty shocking, I have to say. While she may have done great work in lots of other areas, she still hasn't succeeded on the grooming gang scandal. And I think it is actually this particular Labour issue on ethnicity. Remember the Cologne sex attacks, New Year's Eve of 2015? Jess Phillips made comments then, a decade ago, saying that what happened in Cologne in Germany could have happened any night, essentially, in a main street in Birmingham. I think she diminished that form of abuse there, and I think it's possibly the case that she did that because of the ethnicity of the perpetrator.
The context there was Angela Merkel had opened up the borders. Right. And that's why she saw that, maybe why she spoke. But
Britain opened up the borders to Pakistan in the 1960s, and I think the vast majority of perpetrators are Pakistani. I think a lot of Labour-run areas, the evidence, because I wanted this...
Who you showed there?
Those names will come out in time. Trust me.
Okay, good.
They're on standby.
Good.
But
didn't that then, did they?
They didn't.
But you have evidence of who covered it up?
Absolutely. I know people in Downing Street who were pushing this right to the very top. I was in a meeting where a man said, let's bring this to Rishi. I know that it went right to the top.
Did he go to him?
Absolutely. He launched the Grooming Gangs Task Force, the crampdown in April of 2023. But then Home Secretary Suella Braverman, when she came out and made her pronouncements, now vindicated by Casey, saying that there was a particular problem with Pakistani offenders, couldn't find a single Tory to back her up. They all went into hiding. Suella Braverman was abandoned by the party.
All hang their head in shame.
Absolutely. So for Chris Philp, for example, now the Shadow Home Secretary, to say, we've learnt a lot in 2025. You learnt a lot in 2022 and 2023. They had an opportunity then to launch an inquiry and they didn't do it.
And that's why we hear Keir Starmer making those points. And in fact, did challenge you with news to hold them to account. And I said, yes, we are holding them to account, Prime Minister, but you're in power now. Let's move on to where we are now then. The inquiry.
I'll just get something on that as well, Chuck, very quickly, because I know we're getting issues about politicking from both sides. Both sides also need to be honest about each other's record in a positive light as well. For Labour to say the Tories did nothing, I think is very unfair, and I think denigrates the experiences of survivors as well.
Baroness J happened.
Hang on. We've had that
case, original report.
And also, in the same breath that Labour ministers say the Tories did nothing, they'll also then praise the Grooming Gangs Task Force. They'll say, oh, Tories did nothing, 1,000 arrests. I'm sorry, it has to be someone from outside of Britain.
And report by when? The Telegraph reports 3 years. Is that... I mean, I asked the PM on this. I think he said it wouldn't give a timescale. What's your timescale?
Casey told me 3 to 5 years, and I really don't think that will do. It needs to be thorough, but it can be thorough and rapid.
Too long. That's too long.
That's too long, because if it pushes it into the next Parliament, that might be what some government ministers want. It might be what some Labour figures want around the country. It needs to return in this Parliament. But
it's by 2029.
It really has to.
Televise too, Charlie Peters, COVID inquiry, post office inquiry. It does matter to televise and hold people to account on TV.
Yeah, and that absolutely should happen. There obviously will need to be some closed sessions for survivors, families, and
which they ask for it. They may not ask for it.
Yeah, some of them will want it. I know dozens of survivors who've not actually been on air with us, even with the protection we can provide, because they're just so hesitant, because they still live in fear. Those people are now itching still to come forward and give that testimony to this inquiry. But televised is vital. We need to see people squirm. And I'm smiling a little bit now, because I think, for decades, people have been looking forward to this moment. Justice, British justice, needs to fall down on these people, and we need to see them suffer.
And the power to investigate cover-ups.
4,000 victims identified in its first year, many more since then. Yvette Cooper has said that work is accelerating. They're launching a new NCA, National Crime Agency-led task force to deal with this problem nationally, which is also something we called for 2 years ago, having seen the success that the NCA had in Rotherham. They are Britain's FBI, and they are tainted by those local issues. I can't trust local police forces to deal with this issue when they have been part of the cover-up for decades. It is still going on. Right after I leave you, Chris, I'm going up to Newcastle, because we have intelligence that we've had sight of from police forces there, Northumbria Police, that there are live active cases that they're investigating. We've been looking into this for the best part of a year now in Newcastle. They had some convictions in 2017 through Operation Sanctuary, but other trials have collapsed due to policing errors. I can also reveal now with you that the North East Combined Authority Mayor does welcome that national inquiry going to Newcastle. We've heard a lot about Rotherham and Telford and Rochdale and Oldham.